Dear Biker, my name is RJ, and I own a small piece of land just outside Ellensburg, Washington. It isn't a large city by any means. Definitely on the smaller side, but it's very spread out. Farms and ranches surround the town, and this story takes place on a property that I bought just on the outskirts. Well, I purchased the land from an older guy who mentioned that he had kept cows there in the past. At the time, I didn't pay much attention, just proud of the accomplishment of finally owning my own land. I really should have listened more closely, because not long after, I learned that he had moved into an assisted living facility and passed away. For the first year, everything went pretty smoothly. The cows fattened up before winter. We painted the barn red and white, fixed the porch awning, although it later collapsed under the snow, and even set up a rabbit hutch for my kids to learn about raising animals. The trouble first began the following summer. At first, we lost one or two calves. I kind of just assumed that coyotes had taken the weaker ones. And then, one evening, while walking the property, we stumbled across a cloak made of stitched-together animal skins. My kids recognized some of the hides, mostly coyotes. I figured it must have been an old project of the farmers that had blown loose, so we brought it home. That was about the time when the rabbits started disappearing. The cages were left intact, nothing disturbed. Yet, 2 were gone anyway. And then 2 more, until all of them had eventually vanished. I set out some traps, convinced it was clever coyotes, and decided to hunt them myself. One evening, I headed out with my headlamp and a .22 rifle. As the night deepened, I saw signs of coyotes, but never the actual animals themselves. I heard owls, crickets, distant howls, but nothing concrete. When I finally returned around 11 p.m., I noticed scratches high on the kids' favorite climbing tree. Much higher than I could reach myself. Maybe a bear, I thought. But then, a scream suddenly pierced the night, sounding eerily like a woman's. I remembered that cougars could make such cries, so I assumed that was the culprit. The next week, I set up trail cameras around the property. Each one was either smashed to bits or mysteriously blank. The few intact SD cards showed nothing useful. Maybe a passing coyote, but never the actual culprit. Eventually, November came. That's when 2 pregnant cows were killed. Their bodies completely mutilated, but the only things missing were the calves inside. It was extremely gruesome and almost surgical with its precision, and absolutely devastating financially. By midwinter, I was desperate for answers. Coyotes, cougars, bears, even deranged hunters all seemed possible, but none of it completely fit the evidence. Late one night and unable to sleep, I found myself researching predators. That led me down a rabbit hole of cattle mutilation theories and alien conspiracy. I brushed it all off as nonsense until my 13-year-old son came downstairs, pale and terrified. He told me something had been looking at him through his bedroom window. I quickly jumped up and grabbed a flashlight to look outside. And there, against the snow, clear as day, stood a figure. Its skin was pitch black. Its body was thin but towering, shaped like a deer but wrong, hornless, gaunt, and unnatural. The only word that popped into my head was Wendigo. It wore a cloak, pieced together from rabbit fur. My son and I, we stared at it until it slowly walked away. Moments later, that scream rang out. The same one I'd heard before, but This time, it sounded like my son's voice. We haven't seen it directly since, but the signs, they remain. Deep scratch marks on posts, eerie cries in the dead of night. I've tried to photograph it, but the pictures never come out clearly. By spring, I'd sold what calves that had survived, although by then, the losses had already cut into the profit. As the months passed, the creature's presence seemed to slowly fade. Yet, missing pet posters started popping up all over town. Dogs, cats, even a golden retriever. I just can't shake the feeling that it moved on from my property, expanding its hunting range further out. If it once fed on calves, what happens when the livestock and pets aren't enough? I've even heard it mimic the voices of friends and family during gatherings. I've started to post warnings around town, though I know how unbelievable this sounds. Still, I just can't ignore what I've seen. Thank you for reading my story. Signed, RJ. Dear Tattooed Biker, I've actually got 2 cryptid stories from California to share with you. Both happened to me on a farm in Bardsdale between 2003 and 2004. Well, the first event. One evening, my sister, her boyfriend, and I were sitting in an abandoned bus on the farm, drinking beer. The bus was parked near the orchards where the school stored old equipment and junk. Around sunset, we heard these crunching sounds out in the orchard. At first, we didn't think much of it. There's plenty of animals out there, but what happened next has stuck with me ever since. My sister's boyfriend got up to relieve himself outside. As he walked off, we heard something moving behind him. A few seconds later, he came sprinting back, shouting that something was out there with him. We laughed at him until the bus shook violently. Something started banging on the back of the bus. To give you some context, the rear was completely overgrown with weeds, thorns, spiders, ticks, and there's even rattlesnakes out there. No one in their right mind would try to walk around back there. And this wasn't some flimsy old bus. It was thick steel, about 3 inches. Whatever was out there hit it and shook the whole thing with each impact. We froze as we heard heavy footsteps moving along the opposite side of the bus, coming towards the front door. That was enough. We bolted and we ran all the way back to my house. As for the second event, it was almost exactly a year later. In late June, maybe early July, I was standing on my porch late at night, smoking a cigarette. It was pitch black when I suddenly heard something huge running across the field in front of me. Now, my dad was a big man, 6'4" and over 250 pounds. And whatever this was, although I never saw it, sounded at least twice his size. The footsteps were distinct. 2 legs, running like a person, but impossibly heavy. The sound absolutely terrified me. I spun around to run back inside, but my left leg locked straight, my kneecap dislocated, tearing the ligaments, cartilage, and my ACL. Still to this day, I can't walk right because of whatever was out there that night. I've only ever shared these stories with close friends and family, but I wanted you to hear them. Signed, Jay. Hello, Tattooed Biker. I'd like to report some disturbing activity that's been happening around my residence for the past 2 weeks. I'm hoping you can provide some insight into what we might be dealing with. You see, I live in a rural area of southeastern Oklahoma, a few miles outside of Tallahassee. I've lived here all my 48 years and, well, I've never experienced anything strange in this area, at least up until now. One night around 10:30 p.m., I was sitting on my back porch, reading the newspaper. My husband was getting ready to leave for work. Our porch faces a large wooded area, some 800 feet from the lake. Our yard is small, with the edge of the woods only about 50 feet from the house. As my husband walked out, said goodbye, and drove away, I heard a loud, shrill sound coming from the direction of the lake. It kind of reminded me of a pig squealing, but much, much louder and far more unsettling. I stayed there in my chair, staring off into the woods. A few minutes later, I heard something heavy moving through the trees. Whatever it was, it sounded bipedal. 2 feet, not 4. All of a sudden, 3 deer exploded from the woods and bolted past the house. I thought maybe they had caused the sound, so I finally made my way back inside. Now, since that night, I've heard that same piercing cry 4 more times. My husband has joined me on the porch a few of those evenings. He's been a hunter all his life, and even he admitted that he had no idea what could have made such a sound. This past Tuesday night, around 10:45, I was out on the porch again, talking to my daughter over the phone. My husband was at work, and I'd had this uneasy feeling all evening, keeping my eyes fixed on those woods. Just as I was finishing the call and started to get up, I noticed something. There was a pair of bright yellow eyes staring back at me from the brush, about 7 feet from the ground. Terrified, I ran inside, locking the door behind me, and I switched off the lights. The porch light was still on, casting a glow along the tree line. From the kitchen window, I could see it more clearly. A massive, dark figure standing there in my yard. The glowing eyes were still locked onto me. As my vision slowly adjusted, the details slowly took shape. Long, thick arms, ending in fingers with claws, a long snout and pointy ears. It was a huge, upright, coyote-like creature. Then, in an instant, it turned and sprinted back into the woods. I was left shaking, barely able to process what I'd seen. I immediately called my daughter back. She and my son-in-law came straight over. He stayed the night, rifle in hand. The next morning, I told my husband everything. He's part Osage and believes in animal spirits. He suggested that it could be a trickster spirit, and that if we ignore it, it wouldn't harm us. But personally, I just don't believe this thing was spirit. It looked real, flesh and blood, and it resembled nothing that I've ever seen before. A towering, dark coyote walking on 2 legs. Have you ever heard of anything like this? Please, if anyone out there has, leave a comment. I need answers. Signed, April.